My name is Berta. I am 36 years old. I live in a small town in Germany with my husband Helmut. We have been married for 8 years. People say we have a happy marriage. I think that is true most of the time. My husband is a successful businessman. He works in a big company and travels often. I stay at home. I take care of the house. We do not have children, but we enjoy our life together. Helmut is very kind to me. He likes to bring me flowers on Fridays. He often says, "Berta, you are the best thing in my life." When he says this, I smile and feel warm. He also likes to go out to nice restaurants. Sometimes we have dinner by candlelight. He holds my hand and tells me about his work. I listen, and I try to understand his busy world. He loves to talk about business and sports. Helmut is very active. He wakes up early every day. He goes to the gym before work. He eats healthy food, drinks smoothies, and takes vitamins. I admire his energy. He likes to say that health is important for happiness. I agree with him, but I am not like him. I wake up late in the morning. I like to drink coffee and watch TV. I enjoy cooking, reading, and relaxing. I am not very sporty. I am also a little overweight. Helmut never says anything unkind about my weight, but I know he wants me to lose some kilos. He often says, "You will feel better if you eat less sugar." I tell him I will start a diet soon. He smiles and says, "Good, my love. I will help you." I say yes, but in my heart, I feel worried. I know that I like sweets too much. I love cakes, cookies, and chocolates. They make me happy even for a short time. Last month, Helmut bought a new treadmill for the house. He said, "You can walk a little every day. It will help you." I smiled and said thank you. I used it for 2 days. Then I stopped. It made me tired, and I did not enjoy it. Every morning, Helmut asked, "Did you walk today?" I said, "Yes, a little." But it was not true. I started to lie. I told myself it was a small lie and not important, but it started to make me feel guilty. One day, Helmut left for work early. I felt lonely and bored. I went to the basement to wash some clothes. There, on the shelf, I saw a box of candies. I had bought them a week before. I told myself I would not open them, but now they were calling me. I looked at them and smiled. I said, "Just one." I opened the box and took one candy. It tasted so good. I sat on the small chair and ate another, then another. Soon, the box was almost empty. I did not hear the door open. I did not hear Helmut come home. He walked down the stairs to the basement. When I saw him, I froze. He looked at me, then looked at the candy box. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. He said, "Berta, what are you doing?" I wanted to hide the box, but it was too late. I said softly, "I was cleaning. I just wanted a small candy." He said nothing for a few seconds. Then he sighed and said, "I came home early. I wanted to have lunch with you, but I see you are busy." He turned and walked upstairs. I sat there for a long time. My hands were shaking. I felt ashamed. I knew it was not a big thing, but I felt like I had broken a promise. I had said I would start a diet, and I had not. I felt like I had disappointed him. Later, I went upstairs. Helmut was sitting in the living room. He was reading a newspaper. I said, "Helmut, I am sorry. I did not mean to lie." He looked up and smiled, but his smile was small. "It's okay, Berta. It's not about the candy. It's about honesty." His words stayed in my mind. I did not answer. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I sat at the table and thought about our marriage. I loved my husband, but sometimes I felt small next to him. He was strong, healthy, and confident. I was soft, slow, and not very active. I wondered if he was truly happy with me. That night, I tried to act normal. I made dinner and we ate together. He talked about his work, and I listened. He was polite and kind, but I could feel something had changed. The air between us was different. He kissed me goodnight, but his touch was light. I turned off the light and lay awake. I could not stop thinking about what he said. The next morning, Helmut left for work as usual. I stayed in bed and thought about my life. I remembered how happy we were when we first met. I was 28 and he was 30. We met at a friend's party. He was charming, and I liked him right away. He told me I had a nice smile. After that, we met often. He said I made him laugh. I thought he liked me for who I was. Maybe he still did, but now I felt that I was not enough. After breakfast, I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not hate what I saw, but I did not love it either. I saw a woman who tried her best but still felt tired. I saw someone who wanted to be perfect but could not be. I wanted to make Helmut proud, but I did not know how. That afternoon, I decided to start my diet again. I threw away all the sweets in the house. I made a salad for dinner. When Helmut came home, I said, "Look, I made something healthy." He smiled and said, "That's great, Berta." But his smile still felt far away. I wanted to talk about what happened in the basement, but I was afraid. I did not want to argue. I wanted peace. After dinner, we watched a movie. Helmut sat beside me, but we did not hold hands like before. I looked at him from the side. He looked calm and focused on the screen. I thought about the old days when we used to laugh together. I missed that feeling. I wanted it back. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about love. I asked myself what love really means. Is it always about being perfect, or is it about being honest and kind? I did not have an answer. I only knew that I still loved Helmut, and I hoped he still loved me too. The next morning, I woke up early. I went to the kitchen and made him breakfast. When he came down, he looked surprised. "You are awake early," he said. I smiled. "Yes, I want to try to change." He looked at me for a moment, then kissed my forehead. "That's good," he said softly. It was a small moment, but it made me feel better. Maybe our marriage was not perfect, but it was real. We were two people trying to understand each other, and maybe that was enough. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next few days were quiet. Helmut went to work early, and I stayed home. I tried to eat less and walk more. I made soup and salad for lunch. I wanted to show him that I was serious, but deep inside, I felt lonely. The house was big and silent. I cleaned, I cooked, I folded clothes. The same things every day. I tried to keep busy, but my mind often went back to the basement moment. I could not forget his face when he saw me. It was not anger. It was disappointment. At night, when he came home, I smiled and asked, "How was your day?" He always said, "It was fine." Then he turned on the TV or checked his phone. He was not cold, but he was not warm either. I could feel the space between us growing slowly. It was not loud or clear. It was quiet, like a wall that built itself piece by piece. One evening he said, "I will go to the gym after work tomorrow. There is a new trainer. He said he can help me improve my form." I said, "That's nice." He smiled and said, "You should join too. Maybe you would like it." I said, "Maybe later." But in my heart, I knew I would not go. I felt shy. I did not want people to look at me. I was afraid they would judge me. The next day, I stayed home and made his favorite soup. I waited for him to come home. I wanted to eat dinner together, but he sent a message. "I will be late. I am going to the gym and then dinner with some colleagues." I wrote back, "Okay, take care." I looked at the soup on the table. It was still warm, but it did not make me happy. I ate alone and washed the dishes in silence. That night, I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. I thought about our marriage. We used to talk about everything. Now, we mostly talked about food, work, or sleep. I missed how we laughed when we were younger. I missed how we shared small secrets and dreams. I wanted to bring that back, but I did not know how. The next morning, I decided to go out. I put on a simple dress and walked to the park. The air was cool and fresh. I saw children playing, old people walking their dogs, couples holding hands. I sat on a bench and watched them. I felt a little sad but also calm. Then I saw a woman sitting next to me. She looked friendly. She said, "Nice weather today." I smiled and said, "Yes, it's beautiful." Her name was Marta. She said she lived nearby. We started talking. She told me she was a teacher and she liked to come to the park after school. I told her about my husband and our life. She listened and said softly, "You sound like a good wife, but don't forget to be kind to yourself too." I smiled, but I didn't know what to say. Her words stayed in my mind. After that day, I started going to the park more often. Sometimes I met Marta there and we talked. She made me laugh. It felt nice to talk to someone who understood. She said, "Every marriage has small secrets, but love is not about being perfect. It's about understanding." I thought about that many times. Maybe she was right. A week later, Helmut came home early again. I was in the kitchen cooking. When he walked in, I smiled. "You're home early," I said. He said, "Yes, I finished work faster today." I felt nervous. The last time he came home early, he caught me in the basement. But this time, I was doing something good. I was making healthy food. He looked at the table and said, "That looks nice." I said, "It's grilled fish and vegetables." He nodded and sat down. We ate together quietly. After a few minutes, he said, "You look different lately." I asked, "Different how?" He said, "You seem calmer." I smiled. "Maybe because I'm trying to change, but in my own way." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I just want you to be happy." After dinner, we went for a short walk. It was the first time in a long while. The evening air was cool and the sky was full of stars. Helmut said, "I'm sorry if I made you feel bad. I didn't mean to." I said, "It's okay. I just want you to know that I try my best." He smiled and said, "I know." For a few days, things felt better. We talked more. We watched a movie together and laughed. He even brought me flowers again. I felt hope. Maybe everything was going back to normal. But then, one Friday night, he said something that hurt me. We were sitting on the sofa when he said, "You know, I met a new colleague at the gym. She's very active and full of energy. She reminds me of how people were when we were younger." I tried to smile, but I felt something heavy inside. I said, "That's nice." He looked at me and said, "You could be like that too, Berta. You just need to try." I nodded, but I felt small. I didn't want to argue. Later that night, I went to the bathroom and looked at my face in the mirror. I didn't cry, but my eyes looked tired. The next morning, I felt quiet. Helmut noticed and asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, just tired." He said, "You should come to the gym with me today." I didn't want to go, but I said yes. Maybe it would make him happy. At the gym, I felt strange. Everyone looked strong and fit. I felt out of place. Helmut smiled and said, "Just walk slowly. Don't worry." I tried to do the exercises, but I felt clumsy. After 20 minutes, I stopped. I said, "I need some air." I walked outside and sat on a bench. A few minutes later, Helmut came out. "Are you okay?" he asked. I said, "Yes, I just need a break." He sat next to me. "Berta," he said softly, "I'm not trying to change who you are. I just want you to be healthy." I looked at him and said, "I know, but sometimes I feel like you want me to be someone else." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe I've been too hard. I don't want to make you feel that way." That night, when we got home, he helped me cook dinner. It was simple: rice and vegetables. We ate together and talked about small things. It felt peaceful again. But even though things looked calm, a part of me still felt unsure. I wanted to believe that love was enough, but I also wanted to feel seen and accepted. I lay in bed that night, listening to Helmut breathe softly beside me. I thought about all the years we had spent together. We had shared so much: holidays, laughter, small fights, long talks. Maybe love was not always full of big moments. Maybe it was about staying, even when things were not perfect. Still, I knew something needed to change. Not my body, but my heart. I needed to stop feeling afraid of not being good enough. I needed to find peace with myself, not just with him. The next morning, I decided to do one small thing for me. I went to the market and bought some fresh flowers. I put them on the table. When Helmut came home, he looked at them and said, "They're beautiful." I smiled and said, "Yes, I bought them for us." It was a small thing, but it felt good. For the first time in many days, I felt light. Maybe love is not about being perfect, I thought. Maybe it's about learning to live with our small mistakes and still caring. And maybe that was how our happy marriage could begin again. The next few weeks passed slowly. I felt more peaceful, but also more honest with myself. I no longer tried to be someone I was not. I started to take short walks every morning, not to lose weight, but to clear my mind. I cooked simple meals, sometimes healthy, sometimes not. I stopped hiding sweets. If I wanted one, I had one. I did not feel guilty anymore. I decided that honesty was more important than perfection. Helmut noticed the change. He smiled more often. One morning, while drinking his coffee, he said, "You seem happier lately." I smiled and said, "Maybe because I stopped fighting myself." He looked at me for a moment and said, "That's good. You don't have to be someone else for me, Berta." His voice was soft and calm. I looked at him and said, "Sometimes I felt you wanted me to be like you, strong, active, full of energy, but I'm different. I move slower. I enjoy quiet things. I like home, books, and small joys. That's who I am." He nodded and said, "I know. I guess I just wanted you to share my world too." I said, "We can share it, but in our own ways." That night we went for a walk together again. The air was cool and the sky was clear. Helmut held my hand. For a while, we didn't talk. Then he said, "Do you remember our first trip after we got married?" I smiled. "Yes, to the lake." He laughed. "You fell into the water." I laughed too. "Because you rocked the boat." We both laughed for a long time. It felt good. It felt like us again. After that, life started to feel normal, but in a better way. We began to do small things together again, simple things. We cooked dinner together on Sundays. We went for short drives on weekends. Sometimes we sat in silence, just reading. The distance between us started to fade. One evening, I decided to tell him what I had been thinking. I said, "Helmut, can I tell you something?" He said, "Of course." I took a breath. I used to think love meant being perfect. I thought if I didn't look like the women you work with, maybe you'd stop loving me. But I understand now that love is not about looks. It's about kindness and respect. Helmut listened quietly. Then he said, "I never wanted you to feel that way. You are my home, Berta. When I come back from work, I know you're here. That means everything to me." I smiled. "Sometimes I forget that you need care too. I think I was busy feeling not good enough." He shook his head and said, "We both forgot how to listen, but we can learn again." His words made me feel warm. I felt safe. For the first time in a long time, I was not afraid to speak. I said, "I want us to be honest, even about small things. No more secrets, not even about candies. He laughed softly. No more secrets, he said. A few days later, something small but beautiful happened. Helmut came home from work with a paper bag. He said, "Guess what's inside?" I smiled. "Flowers?" He shook his head. "No." I opened the bag. Inside was a small box of candies, my favorite kind. I looked at him, surprised. "For me?" He nodded. "Yes. Life is short. We can enjoy small things." I smiled and hugged him. It was a simple gift, but it meant a lot. It meant he understood. It meant he accepted me as I was. That night, as we sat together, I thought about how strange life is. Sometimes the smallest moment, a box of candies, a few words, a quiet walk, can change how we see love. It is not always big or dramatic. It can be simple, like two people learning to see each other again. Weeks turned into months. Our days were not perfect, but they were calm. Sometimes we still argued, but not for long. We learned to say sorry faster. We learned to listen more. Helmut still went to the gym, and I still stayed home. But he never asked me to join again. Sometimes when he came home tired, I made him tea. Sometimes he helped me wash the dishes. Small things, but full of care. One Sunday morning we went to the park together. The trees were green and the air smelled fresh. We walked slowly, side by side. Helmut said, "Do you ever think about having children?" I looked at him and said, "Sometimes. But maybe our life is good as it is." He smiled. "Maybe you're right. Happiness doesn't always need to be bigger. Sometimes it's already here." We sat on a bench near the pond. I watched the water move slowly. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that comes when two people understand each other without words. When we got home, I looked at our living room. The flowers I had bought weeks ago were gone, but the vase was still there. I decided to fill it again. I went to the garden and picked some small white flowers. When I placed them on the table, I felt proud. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real, like us. That evening, Helmut took my hand and said, "You know, Berta, our marriage is happy, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest." I smiled. "Yes," E said. "I think that's true." Later, when we went to bed, he said, "I love you, Berta." I said, "I love you too." It was simple, but I felt it deeply. Not like before, when I said it to please him, but now, because I truly believed it. That night, I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had happened. The candy, the guilt, the silence, the small talks, the walk, the flowers. Each moment had taught me something. Love was not about being perfect. It was about being kind. It was about saying sorry. It was about staying, even when things got hard. I understood now that a happy marriage is not something that just happens. It is something you build every day, with honesty, patience, and care. As Helmut slept beside me, I smiled. I knew our life was not perfect, but it was full of small moments that made it real. I felt thankful for him, for our home, for everything we had learned, and for the first time in many years, I felt truly happy. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to English Medium Stories. Stay with us for more classic stories in easy English. My name is Greta. I am 24 years old, and I live in Berlin. I take care of plants in office buildings. It is quiet work. I water the plants, clean the leaves, and check if they get enough light. I like the smell of wet soil and green leaves in the morning. Most offices are empty when I go in. Only the lights and machines are awake. I work for a small company that takes care of offices across the city. Every week I visit the same buildings. I move from floor to floor, room to room. Some people smile at me. Some do not see me at all. I do not mind. My work is calm. Plants do not speak, but they still make the air softer. One of the buildings I visit belongs to a large company. It has many offices and long glass windows. The rooms are clean and quiet. The people there wear suits and walk fast. I always start on the top floor and move down slowly. That is where I first saw Mr. Meyer. He was sitting at his desk when I entered his office. Papers were everywhere, but everything looked in order. He had gray hair, round glasses, and a small watch on his wrist. He looked like someone who had lived the same day many times. When I said, "Good morning," he looked surprised, then smiled softly and said, "Good morning." I watered the plants near his window. There were 2 tall ones and they were dry. He asked, "Do they need a lot of care?" I said, "Only a little. They need light and water, just like people." He smiled again and said, "Then maybe I should stand near the window more often." I did not know how to answer, so I just smiled. After that day, I often saw him when I came in. He always sat at his desk early, before most workers arrived. He never played music, never spoke loudly. Sometimes I heard him sigh or whisper numbers to himself. I worked quietly, moving between rooms, but I always saved his office for last. I liked the silence there. One morning he looked pale. I asked if he was all right. He said, "Just a little tired." Then he looked at the plants and said, "They look better than me." I said, "That is because they have someone to take care of them." He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Maybe that is what I need too." I did not know what he meant, but his words stayed with me all day. As weeks passed, I learned small things about him. He worked as an accountant. He had been in the same company for more than 20 years. He said he liked his work because it was safe. "Numbers don't lie," he said once. "But people do. Sometimes." I asked if he liked people. He said, "I used to." We started to talk a little every time I came in. Just small things. I told him about the plants that bloomed in spring. He told me about the new computer system that confused everyone in the office. Once, he said he liked how I always looked calm. I said, "Plants teach that." He laughed softly. It was the first time I heard him laugh. Sometimes he asked me to sit for a few minutes before I left. He offered me tea. His desk was always full of papers. but there was always one clean corner for the teacups. He talked about his work, about the company, about how time moves too fast. I listened. I did not speak much. I liked the sound of his voice. It was slow and kind. I did not tell anyone about him. It felt like a small secret. In the office, people walked by us, busy and loud, but we stayed quiet. It was like the world outside moved fast, and inside his office time stood still. One day, I came in and he looked different. His shirt was pressed, and he had a new tie. He said, "You always see me at work. I should look my best." I smiled and said, "The plant's like that." He said, "And you?" I felt shy and said, "Maybe I do too." After that, he started waiting for me. He knew the days when I came, and sometimes he brought flowers for me, small ones. He said they were from the market near his house. I did not know what to say, but I thanked him. It felt strange to receive flowers from a man whose plants I watered. He never talked about his family, and I did not ask. Once I said, "Do you live alone?" He said, "Yes, I live near the river. It's quiet there." He did not say more. His eyes looked tired. One Friday, when I came to the office, he seemed nervous. He stood up when he saw me. He said, "Greta, I have something to tell you." I put down my bag and waited. He said, "I want to get married." For a second, I thought he was joking, but he looked serious. I did not know what to say. He said, "I'm not asking now. I just want you to know. I think about you a lot." I felt my heart beat fast. I said, "You don't know me very well." He said, "Maybe, but you are the only person who talks to me like I am still alive." I could not look at him. I said softly, "You are kind, Mr. Meyer." He said, "Please call me Eric." I said, "All right, Eric." After that, things changed. He smiled more. He asked when I would come next. Once, he waited for me outside the building. He walked with me to the bus stop. We did not speak much, but it felt warm to have someone beside me. Then one morning, everything felt wrong. I entered the office and saw people whispering. They stopped talking when they saw me. I went to Eric's office, but the door was closed. After a few minutes, he came out. He looked pale again. He said, "Greta, my boss called me in. He heard that I planned to marry you." I said, "Why is that bad?" He said, "He thinks it looks bad. He said I should stop seeing you or leave the company." I stared at him. He said, "I have been here my whole life. I don't know how to start again." I said quietly, "You have to choose." He looked at me for a long time. He said, "I will tell him tomorrow." That night, I could not sleep. I thought about him sitting alone at his desk, counting numbers, afraid to lose what he knew. I wondered what I was to him, a person or just something soft in his gray world. The next day, he did not come to the office at the usual time. When he finally did, he walked straight to his room. I waited outside for a moment, then went in. He was sitting at his desk, his eyes on the wall. He said, "I told him." I asked, "What did you say?" He said, "I said I will get married." I felt a small smile on my face, but he looked down and said, "Not to you. To my office." I did not move. He stood up, took his coat, and said, "It is safer this way. The office never asks for anything. It never leaves." Then he walked past me, slow and calm. I stayed there for a while. The plants near the window looked green and full of life. I picked up my watering can and gave them water. My hands were shaking, but the plants did not notice. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. After that day, I did not go to his office for a week. I asked my manager to send someone else. I said I was not feeling well. It was not a lie. I woke up each morning and felt empty. I went to other buildings, other rooms, but every green leaf reminded me of him. I tried not to think about his words, but they stayed in my head. "I will marry my office." I could still see his face when he said it. Calm, cold, certain. The city outside kept moving. People waited for buses. Children shouted near the market. Cars passed in long lines. But to me, the air felt still. I walked slowly and looked at windows, at lights behind glass, at men and women sitting at desks. I thought, maybe everyone in this city is married to something. A job, a habit, a fear. One morning my manager called me. She said, "Greta, we need you back at the tall building. The other worker is sick." I wanted to say no, but I said yes. When I arrived, the air inside felt the same, clean and dry. The sound of typing came from far rooms. I walked with my bag and small watering can. I told myself, "You are only here to work." When I entered Eric's office, it was empty. The chair was there, the papers, the pen on the desk, but not him. I looked at the plants. They were green, but dry. I touched the leaves. They felt weak. I gave them water slowly. Then the door opened. He came in. He looked at me, and for a moment, we both said nothing. Then he spoke softly. "You came back." I said, "I am working." My voice sounded cold, but I could not help it. He said, "I thought you would never come again." I said, "Plants cannot wait for feelings." He smiled a little, but his eyes looked sad. "The boss was pleased," he said. "He said I made the right choice." I did not answer. He sat at his desk. I finished watering the plants and turned to leave. Then he said, "Greta, please wait." I stopped. He said, "Do you think I made the wrong choice?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him that life is not safe, that love is not a number. But I knew he would not understand. I said quietly, "You made your choice. It is yours now." He looked down at his hands. "I did what I had to do." I said, "Maybe, but you will be alone." He said, "I have always been alone." I said, "Then maybe you do not know what you lost. He said, "I lost peace." I said, "No." "You lost something you never tried to keep." I turned and left before he could say more. That night, I walked home under the streetlights. The air smelled of rain. I thought about him again, sitting at his desk, counting money for people who would never know his name. He gave his time, his years, his heart to a room full of papers, and he called that life. I decided I did not want that kind of life. In the weeks that followed, I asked to be moved to another group of offices. My manager agreed. I started visiting new buildings, smaller ones with fewer people. I liked those places more. They were quiet, but not empty. I met kind workers who said hello and sometimes offered tea. One office had a small balcony with old plants. I liked to sit there for a few minutes after work. The city noise sounded far away. The air felt light. I thought about how people grow like plants, slow and silent, but only if they get light. Sometimes, when I passed near Eric's building, I looked up. The windows all looked the same. I could not tell which one was his. I wondered if he still sat there every day, in the same chair, with the same light. One afternoon, months later, I met one of the reception workers from his company. She recognized me and said, "Oh, you used to come to our offices. Mr. Meyer still talks about his plants. He takes care of them himself now." I asked, "Are they alive?" She said, "Yes, very much. He waters them every day at the same time." I thanked her and smiled. It was a small comfort. That evening, I thought about what she said. He had learned to water the plants himself. Maybe that was his way of remembering me. Maybe he still thought of me sometimes when he saw the green leaves near the window. But I knew we would never meet again. Some people only meet for a short time. Some moments come quietly and leave without noise. I learned that not every connection has a future, but everyone leaves a trace. As months passed, I found peace in my work again. I saved some money and moved to a small flat with more sunlight. I filled it with plants. Tall ones, small ones, some with flowers. Every morning I gave them water and watched them grow. It felt good to care for something that did not ask questions. One evening, I opened the window and looked outside. The sky was turning orange. I thought of Eric again. I imagined him at his desk, alone but calm, maybe thinking that the office was his only home. I did not feel anger anymore, only quiet sadness. I realized then that love is not always about being together. Sometimes it is about understanding someone, even when you cannot change them. A few weeks later, my company gave me a new client, a design firm across the city. The offices were bright and full of color. The people there smiled often. One young man said, "You take care of the plants so well. They look happy." I said, "They just need care every day." He said, "You must love your work." I said, "I try to." He started talking to me often when I came in. He told me about his job, his plans, his small dog at home. His eyes were kind, but not sad like Eric's. He was younger, maybe 30. One morning, he brought me a cup of coffee. He said, "You make the office look alive. I smiled and said, "The plants do that, not me." But later, when I walked home, I thought about his words. Maybe I was changing too, slowly, quietly, like the plants I cared for. I did not fall in love again quickly. I was careful. I had learned that love needs more than words. It needs courage. But I also learned something else. Even when someone breaks your heart, you can still grow. Sometimes on Sundays, I went to a park near the river. I liked to sit on a bench and read small books about nature. Around me, people talked, children ran, and dogs barked. Life went on. I felt calm there. One time, I saw a man in a gray coat walking by the river. For a second, I thought it was Eric. The walk, the shoulders, the slow steps. It all looked the same. I almost called out, but then I stopped. It did not matter if it was him or not. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. I watched him walk away until he disappeared behind the trees. Then I looked down at the small flower in my hand. Its stem was thin, but it still stood straight. I smiled. Sometimes I still thought about his words. I will marry my office. I understood them better now. Maybe he was not wrong. Maybe that was all he knew how to love. But I knew something else. I knew that love can grow anywhere, even in a quiet heart that once broke. That night, I watered my plants before bed. Their leaves shone under the lamp. I touched one softly and said, "You are still here." The room was silent, but full of life. Years passed. The city changed, but my life stayed simple. I still worked with plants. I learned to see how small things live and grow. When I turned 28, I started my own small company. I called it Green Hands. It was just me at first. I took care of plants in small offices and homes. Later, I found 2 helpers. They were young and cheerful. I taught them how to see when a plant is thirsty or tired. They said, "You are very patient." I smiled. I said, "Plants need time. So do people." I still walked the same streets every day. The trams, the sound of rain, the smell of the bakery at the corner. They were all the same. But I was not the same person anymore. I felt stronger. My heart was calm. Sometimes I passed near the old company where I once worked. I never went inside again, but I still remembered every detail. The cold floor, the gray walls, the soft sound of paper. I remembered the plants near the window in Mr. Meyer's office. I wondered if they were still there. One winter morning, I received a call from my old manager. She said, "Greta, do you still remember Mr. Meyer?" I said yes. She said, "He retired last month." The company asked if we can take care of the plants again. They are moving him to a small office for his last year. Would you like to visit? I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Yes, I will go." The next week, I went back. The building looked the same, but the halls felt different. Many new faces, many new names on doors. When I reached the top floor, I stopped for a second and took a breath. I knocked on the door. A voice said, "Come in." He was there. Older, thinner, but still the same calm face. His hair was white now. When he saw me, he stood up slowly. "Greta," he said, as if testing if the name was real. I smiled. "Hello, Mr. Meyer." He looked around and said, "You are still with the plant company." I said, "Now it is my company." He nodded. "I'm glad." I walked to the window and looked at the plants. They were still there, tall and green, the same ones I had cared for years ago. I touched a leaf. "You kept them alive," I said. He smiled softly. "I tried. You told me they need light and water." I said, "They also need someone to look at them." He looked at me and said, "I did that too." We sat down for tea. His hand shook a little when he poured it. The office was smaller now, quieter. There were fewer papers, more space, more light. He said, "I think about that time often." I said, "So do I." He looked at me and said, "I made many mistakes." I said, "Everyone does." He said, "I thought I could live with numbers and silence, but silence grows heavy after a while." I said, "It always does." He sighed. "I wanted to call you once, but I didn't know what to say." I said, "Sometimes there is nothing to say. Some things just end." He nodded slowly. "I see you built your life." I said, "Yes, it took time." He smiled. "Then maybe you did better than I did." We talked a little more. He asked about my work. I told him about the offices, the new plants, the young helpers. He listened with quiet eyes. He said, "You did what I couldn't. You grew." After a while, I stood up to leave. He said, "Will you still come to care for them?" I said, "Yes, they are part of my list now." As I walked out, he said softly, "Greta." I turned. He said, "I never married." I said, "I know." He looked at his desk, then said, "But I kept my promise. I married my office." I smiled gently. "And did it love you back?" He looked at the plants and said, "Maybe a little." I walked away slowly. Outside, the winter air was cold but clean. I looked up at the gray sky and felt peace. There was no pain anymore, no anger, just memory, calm and still. In the months that followed, I visited his office once a week. He always greeted me the same way. "Ah, the plant's best friend." We talked about simple things. He liked to hear about the other buildings I worked in. Sometimes he showed me old letters he never sent. They were short notes about days, numbers, weather, and silence. One afternoon, when I came in, his chair was empty. A young man was there instead. He said, "Mr. Meyer is gone. He passed away last night." I stood for a long time and said nothing. The man said, "He was quiet. He worked until the end." I looked at the plants. They were still green. I touched one leaf and said softly, "He kept you alive." That evening, I walked by the river. I watched the lights reflect on the water. I thought about him and his quiet life. He had given everything to his work, his time, his peace, his heart. but maybe, in his own way, he had found meaning in that. I also thought about how different we were. He had chosen to live inside walls. I had chosen to walk outside them. And yet, both of us had loved something. He, his work. I, the life that grew slowly and quietly around me. Years later, when people asked about my job, I told them, I help things live. Some smiled, some did not understand, but I knew what I meant. At home, my flat was full of green life. Plants stood near every window. Some were old, some new. When I looked at them, I thought of the people I had met, the rooms I had worked in, and one quiet man who once said he would marry his office. Sometimes, I wondered if he ever understood that work cannot love you back, but maybe it does in small ways. Through order, through calm, through the sense that something depends on you. One evening, I sat by the window with tea in my hand. The sky was pink and soft. I whispered, "Goodbye, Mr. Meyer." It felt right to say it. In the stillness, I thought of how people grow like plants. If they get light, they reach for more. Some never look up. They stay where they are planted. But some, even with broken roots, still reach the sun. I smiled. I was one of them. The next morning, I opened my shop early. A young woman came in with a small plant. She said, "It's dying. Can you help?" I looked at the leaves and said, "It just needs care." She smiled. "You sound sure." I said, "I've seen many like this." As she left, I placed the plant near the window and poured a little water. Its leaves were weak but still green. I thought of Eric Meyer and his quiet office, and I felt grateful, not for what I lost, but for what I learned. Some people marry their work. Some marry their dreams. I chose to marry life itself. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to English Medium Stories. Stay with us for more classic stories in easy English.